But in the meantime, just to invite up our next speaker, which is Paddy Phelan. Paddy Phelan is the IrBEA President and CEO of the South East Energy Agency, and he'll be discussing Ireland's energy outlook and the opportunity within that. He is, as I said, the CEO of SEEA, President of our own association for the last number of years. He is on the Executive Committee of the Irish Wind Farmers Association and a committee member of the European Biogas Association. Paddy, if we're going to invite you to... Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you very much, Noel. And I see the Minister is gone just in good time before I was going to give out to him, but just so you know, in the middle of the photographs when we were asked to converse this morning, I gave it to him loads. So, yeah, there is, I suppose, a time. I have a number of slides here which can take you through a scenario. Really, I suppose it comes on foot of, I as Chief Executive of the South East Energy Agency, we've been working on resource assessments in what is predominantly a rural region of Europe, and we've seen an opportunity in considering it that. So what was formerly the Carlow-Kilkenny Energy Agency added Wexford and became the 3 counties, and then added Waterford in 2022 to become the South East, which as a regional perspective is a NUTS 3 region in the European Cohesion Fund programme. So we've a lot of detail, and I don't want to bore you with the detail about the resource potential, but to summarise it, there is lots and lots of potential out there for renewable energy, onshore, offshore. And for some reason, we in Ireland find ourselves last of 27 in percentage of renewable energy, and Europe are getting quite concerned about it. I was in Brussels this week with DG Energy, and we were invited through our network in Federan, which is the European Federation of Energy Agencies, and my chairman of my board is the Vice President of Circular Economy, and one of the areas that they've identified Ireland really falling behind on is heat and transport, and an over-dependence on electricity. So we all are familiar with the climate action plans. So Ireland has lots of plans. It has really, really ambitious targets, which, you know, from the perspective of thought through plans, I believe the understanding is there that we can do this. But as one of my hats, I do some lecturing in SETU in Waterford across a few sustainable programs. One of them is on policy and legislation. And I just urge people to check the Irish government's homework. So if you look at the 2009 National Energy Efficiency Action Plan and the National Renewable Energy Action Plan, and the mandate for us to report every 2 years on that, which Ireland did, but somehow managed to stop after 2016 because it wasn't a pretty picture, we knew from a very early stage that we weren't going to meet our 2020 targets. And in 2020, we duly did not. We finished up at 12.3% out of the 16% of renewable energy by 2020. And we statistically transferred the balance through a European mechanism where if you don't meet your targets, you can offset through trading your emissions target with another member state who has achieved or surpassed their requirements. So we now have the alarm bell whereby we are 13.3% renewable energy of our total energy basket. The European average is almost 26%, and our target for 2030 is 42.5%. Okay? So we are, let's call it a spade, we're 30% behind. And we have less than 5 years to catch up. And I'm across all sectors, bioenergy, I'm across energy efficiency, renewable energy through electricity storage. I'm a member of the board of Renewable Energy Ireland. So I'm looking at all of our sectors and renewable, and everybody is saying the same thing. If it's onshore wind, planning. If it's onshore solar, planning. If it's onshore batteries, markets. If it's offshore wind, markets. If it's offshore wind, licensing. If it's onshore biomethane, planning. If it's onshore, biomethane, supports. If it's onshore, biomethane, it's markets. So there's lots and lots of barriers, but what we do know is that the potential is there. So just as a snapshot of that, we in the southeast region across the 4 counties have put together, and we supplied these into the county development plans in 2019 across the 4 counties, and they included them in those. They included them in their plans, and then our elected members, when the County Kilkenny County Development Plan came to be passed in 2021, it got stopped by the elected members on the last day. So the planning regulator identified that Kilkenny County Council had considered its need to contribute to renewable energy targets for 2030 through community energy programmes, through bioenergy, and bioenergy has been stitched in as a separate chapter, not through a renewable energy planning chapter, but an actual chapter within the primary county development plan, which has more statute opportunity for An Bord Pleanála or whoever might need to consider it in considering projects. But in a nutshell, with all of that effort to have a climate conscious plan which took into consideration its resources and its potential, so this is the 4 counties combined, but if you just look at the overall individual counties, they put these numbers into their draft county development plans. And they were turned down by the locally elected members on the last day. The last day, the day before the plan was to be adopted, it was brought to the council. That's how county development plans are built. They must go through public consultation, they must go through all the best will and intention, have all of the considerations, but when it comes to the final day, the elected members must adopt that plan, and they did not. Now, the previous legislation, we talked about the new legislation that was passed last night, or the new Act on Planning. It gave the Minister the opportunity to instruct an amendment to the plan. And the Minister wrote an instruction to the Kilkenny County Council in 2021 by advice of the planning regulator. But what is happening? Nothing. So we still have a draft plan in Kilkenny. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't allow for more wind. It doesn't allow for any change in terms of the existing. And it doesn't give any credence to An Bord Pleanála if they need to consider projects at that higher level. Now, when we talk about the new Act and we understand what levers it has, they are one and the same. It's talking about regional planning guidelines, and they've been adopted at local levels. These have been there, and we still find the NIMBYism, and we still find those who the locally elected representatives rely on for votes every 5 or 7 years, calling the shots. So we have a huge job of work to do to convince and to communicate. And it's something in our meetings with DG Energy, and I'll bring it back to that, they have highlighted Ireland and Spain as 2 of the areas that can contribute quite substantially to the biomethane demands for Europe. And they've asked the questions, and they've asked us as a rural representative of a region and also some of the national entities, how can Ireland contribute to the 35 billion cubic metres of biomethane that's required by 2030 for Europe? And they want us to be net exporters of biomethane. And they're trying to understand, why is this not policy? Why is this not being supported? Why is it not developed? And why are we so far behind on our targets? They're the general questions. But one of the key outcomes of discussion through the week was the need for all of us to better communicate climate benefits and the socio-economic benefits, particularly in a rural region like the one I've just suggested that we are in, which is really reliant on, and Europe is very focused on, not depopulating rural regions. And biomethane, as an example, and bioenergy, biomass solids, bioliquids, they all create employment. And the study that we, sorry, it's gone blank. The study that we in the Southeast Energy Agency launched last week with the support of Gas Networks Ireland looked at the potential for biomethane, and it suggested that if you look at biogas in the existing opportunity is 1.7 terawatt hours now. If there was a support scheme opened operationally tomorrow, there are sufficient projects in planning, and there are sufficient projects there to immediately implement 1.7 terawatt hours just in the southeast region in the 4 counties. There's projects there already, the one on the front cover, that's been operational for almost 15 years, and it still is not connected to the gas grid, but it will be soon, we hope. So there's lots of barriers, and Europe is saying, get them out of the way, get moving on this. move forward. So there's a wider basket. These are just some of the demands in the southeast region. So we've taken this regional approach, and it's been quite effective in getting us to Europe to kind of mark the card of the centralised Irish government's policies and schemes and approaches. Again, just all this renewable energy data, we've looked at all the opportunities and all the different technologies and what can contribute. So we want an all of and Renewable Energy Ireland, which was part of setting up in 2018 with Mary Donnelly and bringing wind, solar, bioenergy, everybody together to work together, because we're all needed. That's key. But the question is constantly being asked, why is bioenergy being the forgotten old reliable? It's not being supported. There's just some of the bioenergy analysis, and that's available on that study. I won't go through too much detail, but what we've done is we've done a bottom-up approach to what's the total potential. So if you can just see, in simple terms, the bottom line, the 1.7 terawatt hours of biomethane, which is available today, if there was a scheme and we could connect and the price was right. I can't remember what program that was it the Darts one or something? The Price is Right. If the price is right and commercial viability is key to a sustainable entity, 14% of the total primary energy in the southeast region is available from biomethane. Okay, so just start doing the math. Sorry, I'm an engineer, but that's the way we kind of work on the numbers. So if we add 14% to the 5.4% that's solid biomass, that brings us up to above 20%. That's the primary energy demand. So that's 20% towards our 30% we need by 2030 to bring us up. And then if you look at the various aspects, I suppose my contention is in the future is if you add that to our targets around renewable electricity, so we get them working together, that's 15% on top of what I believe, or sorry, 20% on top of the existing 15% of electricity that's formed from renewables. So we're at 30% without really doing much other than changing the policies or changing the support programs. We have good plans, we have very little action on the ground. Again, just looking at the overall bioenergy, we understand the role of bioenergy. We know how all of the various aspects can be brought into electricity, heat and transport. And our study specifically identifies the opportunity for transport through CNG. And unfortunately, the southeast is not part of the 10T network because of age-old classifications of ports. So the likes of the M8, Dublin Cork, Dublin Belfast, is on the European 10T network. So therefore gas networks can get some funding to put in filling stations which are not available in the southeast region, for example. So we're lobbying to get those little anomalies in terms of, you know, the cohesion funds and how we can make sure that the southeast region is what they consider to be justified in terms of support to build out heat transport and renewables. This is a project example which we applied for project funding in 2018 to Interreg, and we identified a project that could help us understand the market and the model. So Ormond Organics were the partners, and they needed to install a biomethane upgrader, and there was no support available in Ireland for it. So we got them some support to build out that quite expensive capex to bring an upgrader to their existing CHP to upgrade biogas to biomethane. And they were partners in the project. And on the other side of the project, we brought the public sector. And they are mandated under European directives to lead the way, to demonstrate. And the focus was heat, renewable heat, not transport, renewable heat. So there's 3 projects, 2 fire stations and a machinery yard are currently burning biomethane, and it's delivered in cylinder racks through a virtual network. But those plants are all directly connected to gas as it stands. So the model here is that we're going to demonstrate that we have to bring it by road, but as soon as you can inject it, you don't need to transport it. So it's looking at both options for the public sector for renewable heat. If you're on the gas grid, let's get the methane into the grid, and then those plants or those sites can take it directly out of the grid and leave their existing plant in place. So that's a very circular, economistic way of throwing out old gas boilers but actually retaining them and burning natural gas blended and buy their certificates like we do the electricity system. But there's a significant part of the southeast region is not connected to the gas network. So the alternative is that they can bring them by cylinder. So it's like transported, like we have existing LPG. You can have biomethane compressed in liquid form and delivered by cylinder or tank. So again, we've demonstrated this and we're using this, but the cost that's required for that gas is significantly more than you can buy natural gas for. So there is the commercial reality. And what we understand in Europe, and they appreciate, is that we have to acknowledge the cost differential. And as Europe, we understand the cost differential. In Ireland, we understand the cost differential. And it's no longer justifiable to say that, okay, we have to go technology neutral on all our auctions, and we subsequently then have to buy the cheapest. Because we all know in procurement, and I'm sorry the minister is gone, but maybe it's recorded and we can send him a snap of it. But in procurement, it's not always the cheapest is best. So we need to understand that, and we need to make that case in Europe to say, look, we need some exemptions here, we need some supports to enable us to have auctions or whatever is required in terms of procurement to get the best price, okay, best price, but it has to be sustainable. So you can't buy biomethane for the same price you can buy natural gas. It's simple. Just to look at the electricity, again, just to bring it in the round as the total solution, I know this is the Bioenergy Conference, but we have significantly high renewable electricity targets incorporating onshore and offshore, solar, and other forms, hydro, biomethane for biogas for CHP, biomass for CHP. All of these things are staples of the European renewable energy targets, and how they're achieving their targets includes all of the above. So we had an assessment done at the National Grid in terms of what the potential was for integration of renewable electricity onto the system, and we identified the main circuits and the main characteristics of the transmission and distribution network. And the good news is it's in good shape for now, but it's not in particularly good shape for the future if we go and electrify everything, and if we bring on all of the offshore and onshore renewable potential that is out there, either in development or planning or ready to connect. What we identified is that 42% of renewable electricity in the southeast region is based on 2019 demand and typical capacity factors for renewable energy. So a lot of our existing power is connected from fossil fuels, which we know we have to move away from. And the demand in the region, almost 40% of the connected renewables are meeting the demand, but we're arguing that we can, through the various vectors of bio and renewable electricity, we can achieve 100% renewable energy in the southeast region if the supports are provided. Again, just some demand projections. So we're seeing a growth in projections of demand for electricity. So that, we believe, should be met primarily by renewable electricity. And I think that the home for biomethane and bioenergy, typically we'll see from a technology perspective, is in heat and transport. And they're the areas that we have performed desperately in terms of decarbonisation. So again, developing transmission assets can take considerable time to bring from concept to completion, and recent experience have been over the 15 years that to develop a 220 kV circuit in Ireland has been quite challenging. And anyone from the southeast will remember the placards through 2014 and 15 when IrGrid had Grid 21 project planned to bring a 400 kVA line from Dublin down to Great Island. It didn't get very far, and then that resulted in contagion onto wind farms and anything really on a pole, whether it was a wire or a target. In terms of anything that stood up, the rural population wanted to say no, no pylons, no wind turbines, no, 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 no. Communities said no. So it takes time. Now, obviously, our new legislation, these are critical infrastructure assets, as are the gas network, in my opinion, and there's need to change that narrative around. I'm not sure where it started. I don't know why it started, that the fossil grids need to be removed. I don't believe they do. I think they need to be renewed, increase the percentage of methane, and in the future, when hydrogen is of a sufficient efficiency in terms of round trip, can be supplemented and injected into the existing gas grid. But if you look at the offshore, and then you look at all of the onshore potential, what we know is that there's significant upgrades required to the electricity system also. So just a bit about the government support schemes. Look, they're there, but SSRH has not been successful, and I say that loudly. The work that Sean and I and some of the members in IrBEA have had to literally have a fish swim against the tide to even keep the programme open. And the kind of answers like, oh, well, no one is really interested in it. They're not interested in bureaucracy and they're not interested in challenges. They want easy access to programmes. And when we're so far behind on renewable targets, it's really important. Offshore, warmer homes, small-scale renewable electricity support schemes, they're all there, but they're slow in terms of uptake and movement. There's hydrogen, which is the future. Again, I won't go into it. And then the biggest challenges in reaching renewable energy self-sufficiency, as we all know, cover multiples, but the physical infrastructure and employment opportunities is really where bioenergy beats the rest. It provides jobs. We've identified 1.7 terawatt hours of projects in the southeast. We've identified 240 direct jobs, and you can multiply that by 10 for the supply chain network into those projects. They're rural jobs. They're in towns and villages. They're not in cities. They're not in 14-storey buildings on the quay in Dublin. They're there. They're real. They're keeping kids in GA clubs. They're keeping kids swimming clubs. They're keeping kids in national schools. They're keeping the rural fabric of Ireland. And that's something that Europe is as interested in as they are in renewable electricity and renewable energy targets. So it's my take that we have identified a model, and it's now over to government to bring an operational programme and support scheme in. And if there's challenges around European state aid, they're willing to listen. We've proven that there is a cost differential. We now need to make the case for that to be supported, and we need to treat it as seriously as we did wind 10, 15 years ago. So that brings me to an end. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paddy. If I can ask Paddy and Jan to stay on stage for our first panel discussion, and also if I can ask our three additional panellists to the stage, Karen Doyle from Gas Networks Ireland, John Walsh from the ESB, and Conor Mulvihill, Director of Dairy Industries Ireland. I'm also going to ask Sean Finan back to the stage, who will be chairing this next session. Thank you very much.